Hebrew, or in Greek, is meno. And it's to stay, to stand, to remain present with me. And Jesus is saying, I don't want you constantly trying to follow the rules in your head. He's saying, just be with me. Just be with me. Be with me in that blood. I've created you to remain in me. Be with me. Be present with me. When you're at work, when you're in your car, when you're having an argument with your boyfriend or your husband, be with me. Let me be in there with you, because I'm constantly shining my light into the darkness. I'm constantly showing you the way to live. You do not have to constantly, it's not about rules. It's about remaining in Christ. He is the vine. We are the branch. And you know what? He showed me, in Christ we are never meant to exit the blood. Just like these wedding shoes, I wore down an aisle, a sacred aisle, where I was walking to my husband, to actually, the wedding, I did not know this either, but the wedding aisle, the very first wedding aisle that there ever was, took place back in Genesis when God married Israel. And it talks about this in Genesis 15, 7 through 18. And it's when, if you guys, I'm just going to paraphrase for you because we're going to run out of time if I tell you the whole thing. But when Abraham was like, God, how do I know that you're going to keep this promise with me? God made a covenant with Abraham, and he told him to go get these animals, these sheep and these goats and these bulls. And he actually cut them in half. And he laid their bodies over each other like this, so that literally there was an aisle of blood. And then, you know who passed over that blood? God did. He sent Abraham into a deep sleep. So while Abraham is asleep, there's the Spirit of God passing over that blood, making covenant. That's covenant, cutting covenant with Israel, saying, I am marrying you. This promise that I'm making doesn't depend on you, Abraham. You're not even awake. But this promise depends on me. Just like in the wedding, we talked about we talked about the covenant that the groom makes with his bride, and how the responsibility of keeping that covenant falls on the groom, not the bride. In fact, when you came to Christ, you weren't doing one thing right. If you've come to him, you were in total sin. You were asleep, just like Abraham was when that covenant was made. And God said, I am coming for you. You are totally asleep. You have no awareness of what I'm doing, but I'm coming for you. And the whole burden of your life depends on me now, not on you. And I am walking down this aisle of blood, and I'm coming for you. And there was a torch of fire that walked down that. And to me, that brings what God is saying in 1 John totally home to me, because there was an aisle of blood. It was at night. It was very dark. There was darkness, and there was a light. In 1 John, what is there? There's darkness, there's light, and there's blood. And there is a wedding aisle. And do you know that when a bride gets married, how you have the bride's family sit on one side, the groom's family sit on the other. Do y'all know that there's tradition to that? It's called there's actually a name for it. The aisle of blood covenant. It's her blood and his blood. And the bride and groom are going to walk down that, just like God walked down the aisle and cut covenant with each other. And what do you do when you get to the end of the aisle? There's actually an altar there where you meet with the preacher or whoever's going to marry you. And what do you do at an altar? Altars are there for a death to happen, right? So who's dying, you might ask? You are. The bride and the groom both die on that altar. And they both die to their individual life. She's dying to herself, he's dying to himself, and the two become one. A brand new creation created in Christ Jesus. So what God has been showing me through that is that aisle, this whole life we're here, which I think, what time does it take for you to walk down an aisle in a wedding? It just takes maybe, if it's a long aisle, maybe a minute. And I thought, you're kidding me, God. Our whole lives here are meant to be walking down that aisle with Christ. We're walking in the blood. We're walking down the aisle the whole entire time. And we may think that how could that be? Because our lives are so long. But you know what? In light of eternity, it's not that long. 10 million years from now, you're still going to be alive, and you're going to be walking with Jesus, and you're going to be his bride, and you're going to look back at the whole life, the whole time you spend here, and it's going to have been like a minute. In fact, this isn't in part of my lesson, but one of my friends told me about a friend that she has that, which just totally, I think about this probably almost every day. She had lost her grandfather, who she was very, very close to. And when she lost her grandfather, and just the reality of losing someone that close to you just kind of shook her. And she began to question, is God real? Is there really a heaven? Where is he right now? And she began to ask God and say, where are you? Are you real? Where's my grandfather? I want to know where he's living right now. And she had a dream that night that she asked God that hard question. And during the dream, she went to heaven and she was with Jesus. And he asked her, he didn't speak, but he took her hand and led her into this big pool of water. And she was scared to go, but she knew she was supposed to go. And he took her and he put his hand on her and he put her under the water and lifted her back up. And during that time she was under the water, it was her whole life. It was her whole life. She saw it was in this quick. And her whole life went. And when she got up, she was like, wow, that's how fast it goes. We're here for such a short time to walk down the aisle towards our groom. To walk to that place where we're going to meet him. And we're literally, these bodies are going to be physically gone. And we're going to enter into eternity with him as his bride. And it's that fast. And 10,000 years from now, you'll say, it was that fast. It was that fast. To us, maybe if we're lucky, 85 years. Maybe some of us might live to be 100. I hope I'm not one of them. But, I mean, even if we do, it's going to have gone that fast. Is it too hard to stay in the blood, to walk on that aisle with Christ, to stay in the blood, letting that light shine into our darkness, letting us lead the way, keeping our eyes on our perfecter, the perfecter of our faith? That's okay. So, Jesus is our mikvah. He is our bath. He's our bath the whole time we're here. And as long as we're walking in him and we're staying in that presence, we are clean. You know what happens when we get out of the aisle, out of the blood? We're not dirty because he's done a good job at cleansing us, but our consciousness gets dirty. And you know what it does? We get out of that aisle and we're like, oh, I am filthy. There's no way I can go back there. And Jesus is like, girl, hurry, pay the price, you get back here and walk with me. But it's our consciousness that bears witness. And we move out of the awareness of who he is. And the enemy loves to keep us in that place. That stronghold that sets up in our minds that says, you don't deserve to be on that blood. You don't deserve Jesus. I better be good for a while and then I can earn my way back. But we know that we can't earn our way back. There's nothing good in us. Especially the only hope we have is to say, I know I'm a mess, but I'm jumping back in here because I know I need you, Jesus. And that's what he means when he says that. That's what he means when he says that we have to be aware of our sin. We have to be aware of our sin because we have to know that this is where we have to stay. This is our way, our truth, and our life. We have to be aware of it all the time. Or I know what's going to happen if I leave this. I already know what I'm going to be. And sometimes none of us are going to stay in this aisle but perfectly the entire time. But let that heart of God, the longer we walk with him, the more we begin to trust his heart. And we begin to say, Lord, I know I'm a mess, but I know you love me. I'm coming back home to you. And the more you walk with him, the quicker and quicker you will get back on that aisle with him because you trust the heart of your groom and your husband. In John 3, 1 through 17, it talks about how Jesus was washing the feet of the disciples. And he tells them, he says, because of my words I have spoken to you, you were clean, except for your feet. And I thought that was very interesting, except for our feet. Because in Genesis 3:15, at the very beginning, when the curse was given to the serpent, it says this is what he says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her